Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast, brought to you by Rocket Agency. I'm your host, James Lawrence. Welcome back to the Smarter Marketer podcast. Today I'm joined by Kieran Krohn. Kieran, great to have you on the pod.
James, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invite.
We've talked about it for a while, and we finally managed to squeeze some time into your busy calendar. So Kieran's currently Senior Sales Manager at HubSpot. He's been at HubSpot for over 7 years now, previously worked as Principal Channel Partner Manager as well as Senior Partner Acquisition roles at HubSpot. Today, we're going to be digging deep into customer retention and why that is such an important topic and theme for listeners to the pod. But yeah, Kieran, I think it'd just be good to, before we jump into it, just to hear a little bit of your backstory in terms of HubSpot. It's been quite a journey. I think we probably crossed paths, 4 or 5 years ago now, and you're a bit of a rock star. You're in the President's Club, the Chairman's Club. What's the club called?
Oh, there's a few. We've got President's Club, we've got Founders Club, all the clubs.
Which puts you in kind of the top echelon, I guess, of performers at HubSpot over the last couple of years. So you'll be modest and won't admit that, but on your LinkedIn, I'm always seeing you being flown somewhere in the world by HubSpot based on smashing it. So yeah, it'd be just good to hear about your journey through the organization.
Yeah, sure. So the funny thing was, when I started interviewing at HubSpot, I had no idea that I was going to be moving into the partner space. So my history prior to HubSpot was in direct sales, both kind of like inside and outside sales. So I kind of got thrown into it after I accepted the job. Actually turned out to be probably one of the best surprises in my life. I didn't know anything about channel sales, but I guess kind of fast forward, 7 years later after working in the channel for about 5.5 years. It was just a massive opportunity to really get to learn a lot about businesses, to understand go-to-markets, to help partners. Obviously, it was great working with Rocket, and we did a lot of work together. I kind of started off in the acquisition space. HubSpot did kind of have the role combined together. So we were working on identifying good fit partners, bringing them onto the partner program, onboarding them, enabling them, and then working with them to help them to bring customers onto HubSpot. They then split that role into 2 separate roles because it was effectively an acquisition and more of a kind of farming role. Did that for a while and then went back to being a channel account manager, just working purely with partners.
Yeah.
And then, I've kind of made the leap into direct sales leadership about a year and a half ago.
Yeah. And HubSpot itself has grown massively, right, in Sydney or in Australia since that time when you started?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I was employee number 22 in Australia when we started.
Yeah.
When I started, sorry. And I think now we're probably up to about 100, 150-ish.
Yeah.
Number. Yeah.
And huge growth worldwide. And just thought good to get you onto the pod on this topic because you kind of straddle a whole bunch of different areas. I think from the perspective of working in sales, and this topic touches sales, this topic touches marketing. You've dealt with marketers kind of through so much of your time at HubSpot. HubSpot itself is a platform that helps businesses solve this problem or get better at working towards this problem. And HubSpot itself is almost a case study in how to do this stuff well. So just felt there was such a convergence of so many different factors coming together that just made sense. First of all, the why. Why is customer retention important? And I think it's probably not as sexy a topic as it probably should be.
Yeah, you're dead right about that. I think the thing that always fascinates me is when I speak to marketers and businesses and just all the content you kind of see coming out through LinkedIn, by and large, a lot of it is around customer acquisition, right? How do we bring more customers in? How do we bring in new business? How do we generate pipeline from prospects? Yet, I think the big opportunity for marketers is how we tap into revenue from existing customers, particularly businesses that have been with you for a while, because retention rates are high, there's high kind of service or product adoption. Generally, it's going to be much, much easier to have a conversation with one of those customers than it is to bring on a new customer. And I think statistically, it's about 5 times more cost effective to win business from an existing customer than it is to bring on net new. So when you think about the economics of it, it just makes total sense. It's just always puzzled me a little bit why that is the case, why there's this kind of obsession about new and sort of less of a focus on the existing.
I think, and we're all guilty of it, right? It's kind of, in our agency, we're talking clicks, impressions, cost per lead, cost per acquisition, and every month it's kind of move forward and get more of those customers. And I was reading up prior to this pod, and it was kind of interesting. HubSpot was an example of a business doing it really, really well. But yeah, that stat that it's literally 5 times cheaper to retain an existing customer or client than it is to land a new one. Also far more profitable to retain an existing client, like almost regardless of your business model, that onboarding phase is just expensive. And it's harder to, if you're in a business where you've kind of got humans having to close off a deal, increasing a scope to an existing client is always a better win rate than going off to people that haven't transacted with you before, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. The win rate's always going to be higher because there's an existing relationship, there's trust with the brand. So you're not starting that from scratch.
Yeah. So what do you reckon? Like, if accountability for this doesn't always sit within marketing, but I think in a lot of businesses it does. I'm a marketer, I'm busy, I've got trying to do SEO, I'm trying to do Google ads, I'm trying to get my email marketing going. How do I go about improving this number, or even kind of understanding what it is?
Probably firstly starts with making sure that you've got the right systems in place to start to segment your database. Obviously, like HubSpot's a CRM, so I might be a little bit biased when it comes to that. But sort of what I'm
here comes the shameless product plug.
Yeah, look, whether it's HubSpot or any other CRM, I think just the most important thing is you have a database, not just any database, but one that's clean and that's accurate and that's up to date. That's obviously the most important thing. So making sure that you have your customers stored and segmented, and kind of, when I say segmentation, kind of breaking them up into different lists. So that could be based off what products or service they've purchased recently, when did they last purchase, what's the value of that customer, kind of thinking about it from that lens, and then kind of also understanding sort of what their demographics are, their kind of buyer behaviors, their preferences, those types of things. Because ultimately, like, marketing is all about context, right? And so you want to deliver the right message to the right person at the right time. And if you have that data, it allows you to start to kind of deliver on those 3 things.
100%. And something I see businesses kind of failing at is, one, that they actually don't have the number. They don't know what that churn rate is, or it's not sitting front and center in the organization, so they actually can measure against, the number they're trying to improve. And the second one I kind of struggle with is accountability, because obviously churn can be impacted by so many different things. It's like, if sales team on board, average quality customers, or the actual leads coming in are pretty average quality from the very instance, you're going to churn higher than if you bring in high quality, good fit customers and clients. Customer service, client services teams obviously play a massive role in the actual delivery of whatever your product or service is. So I think often that responsibility for churn within an organization doesn't sit anywhere, right? And I think it's really important that, first of all, you're measuring it, and second of all, someone is accountable for it. And obviously they'll have to probably pull in various stakeholders to improve it.
Yeah, no, you're dead right. But I think that's probably why we've seen a pretty massive rise in revenue operations, right? Like, RevOps is one of the fastest growing kind of role titles or professions in the space that we play, because, without a sort of RevOps function that sort of sits over the top of marketing, sales, and service, then there is no responsibility, accountability, people just pointing fingers at each other. And I think that RevOps function, which is driven by leadership, is a really key part of running a successful business. I mean, not every small business is going to have the time or the resource or money to invest in that, but I think that we're seeing it more and more. It's definitely like a space that's going to continue to grow in the future.
Yeah, it's a good point. Can you maybe just talk a little bit more about it for listeners that aren't as familiar with the function?
Yeah, sure. In terms of how I see RevOps, like I mentioned, it's a sort of a layer of the business that does sit over the top of, but in a way combine or align those different parts of a business. It's probably the biggest challenge that we see with most companies is there's a lack of alignment between, firstly, marketing and sales, and then sales and their kind of service or delivery team. So having everyone on the same page, aligned with a common objective, which is growth and revenue for the business, retention, whatever those different metrics might be, it really just means that we're all working together as opposed to working in different silos.
Yeah, classic kind of sales and marketing misalignment, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Which is a good point. And we're talking before we started recording, we've obviously got very different businesses represented by listeners to the pod. We've got marketers working in businesses that, might be small professional service firms or reasonably large professional services firms that might themselves not have a huge number of customers or clients. And then we'll have listeners that might be running an e-commerce business or a SaaS business where there's thousands, hundreds of thousands of customers. So I guess what customer retention, what are those themes or pillars that you think just hold true regardless of the size of your business? And then what are some of those things that become a bit different when you start talking about customer lists that are just so vast that you can't really have a handle on each individual customer?
I think the things that remain consistent really come back to my point before around data and segmentation. So whether you've got 100 customers or 100,000, you still need to know your customer, right? And the ability to segment, it's not hard. Any business can do it today. I think that kind of understanding purchase history, previous behaviors, previous conversations, all those things just allow you to deliver more contextual messaging to your customers. I think outside of that, when you kind of get to 100,000 and kind of beyond, these kind of numbers, that's where using a mixture of automation but human intervention is going to be important to drive scale, because there's no way you can be speaking to 100,000 customers or in any kind of meaningful way. But I think that's what's exciting about marketing is the more that you have profiled those customers, the more that you've segmented them, allows you to just make sure you're driving the right message. And as your customers are engaging with marketing comms, you can then start to feed that information, those insights back to your sales, your account management team. So if we're finding higher engagement from this segment, we can start to drive more human intervention. We can start to have more meetings. We can start to score leads. That's where things start to get pretty interesting.
Yeah. And just practically, I'd be keen to jump into things like loyalty programs and referral programs, what you're seeing, what's working and what's not working out there.
I think what's important there is to understand sort of firstly, how happy are our customers? Do we have any way of surveying them, whether it's through NPS, customer satisfaction? If you're a smaller business, you might be able to do that sort of one-to-one through an account management team. But do you have a process and an ability to record that feedback and do something with it? It's not just about getting the feedback, but taking action off the back of it. And it's not all good. I'm sure there's bad as well, right? No business is perfect. So instead of reactively waiting for customers to put their hand up or call in and say, I want to leave, or that's the worst result, that churn, proactively getting on the front foot and taking action, right? And then sort of off the back of that feedback, you can start to improve your processes when it comes to account management, service delivery, those different types of things.
And what's the HubSpot outlook at the moment with NPS? Because NPS was obviously all the rage, when it kind of became popularized probably around a decade ago. There's probably been some groundswell against it at some level. I think some people doubting whether the popularization has impacted the original kind of theory behind it. And I think just a saturation, right, where you kind of engage with any business, you walk, you buy a product and then suddenly before you've even received it, you've got your NPS survey. Is HubSpot still kind of locked in with NPS as being the best kind of approach or the best tool to kind of get that sentiment out on scale, or are there other approaches as well?
There's definitely more than one way to skin a cat. I think NPS is still there. We still survey all of our customers, not to say that they all respond, right? Because people get these. But yeah, we still use NPS a lot at HubSpot. We also look at other ways of monitoring satisfaction outside of them filling out a survey. So, this is probably more relevant to software-based companies or businesses that have applications, but an example might be, measuring adoption, usage of the platform and the tools. We can see things around logins, those kind of things, user behavior in terms of application. Probably also you could start to look at those things in terms of your website, because I think my belief here is your website, again, getting back to the theme of this, shouldn't just be there from a lead generation perspective, but should also be there to nurture and engage existing customers. So you're keeping your brand front of mind. You can start to look at how your customers are interacting with your website. right? And so all these kind of things, all these, I guess, signals can be used to understand engagement as well.
Yeah, that's right. And the HBR article that I was reading leading into this pod cited HubSpot's a long time ago now, but HubSpot during the kind of economic crisis in the States, where basically the economy, was going south very quickly, and HubSpot started to look very deeply into the way that its customers were interacting with different features and functions within the software, and using that to then proactively go out to those users to say, to feed them information to kind of arm them to get better results from that with the features or software that they weren't necessarily using, which I think that's right. Like it's really difficult to get sentiment. I think whether you're a small business or a large one, but you kind of, NPS can be a bit of a blunt instrument, but if there's no other way of doing it, then what do? Smaller business like Rocket, then we have the benefit of it being able to actually sit down face to face and survey customers, right? But you can't do that if you're IKEA.
Yeah, exactly. I think the other thing I'd add to that, James, would be when a customer signs on, they have something they're looking to achieve. They have an outcome that should generally be tied to some sort of metric within the business. So if you're identifying and agreeing on that impact and that metric, when the customer goes through, a level of onboarding and service delivery and account management, there should be an ability to measure that impact over time, right? So like that is another way to generally look at satisfaction without the customer even telling you, because if they've achieved the outcomes they set out to in the first place, should be pretty happy for them.
Yeah, I really like that. I think some good reading for anyone that's interested in this topic is Never Lose a Customer Again, Joey Coleman book. And that's definitely one of the key kind of principles there, right? Is to identify that North Star metric that you just keep referring back to, because that's why, whatever the engagement is about, that's the reason why the transaction happened in the first instance. In terms of referral programs and loyalty programs, what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I think I've seen it on a couple of different levels. When it comes to like loyalty, I think there's a few ways to look at it. So like there's obviously like financial incentives that you could start to offer customers, particularly from a referral perspective. You could offer, I've seen from a service perspective, like the ability to offer a customer, I don't know, like a kind of discount on their renewal or some sort of financial reward for them to refer customers in. I mean, like the reality is, if you've got really happy customers and they're delighted with what they're getting from you as a business, they shouldn't need to be incentivized because they're happy, they've got exactly what they set out to achieve. And that's, again, where that sort of understanding and asking the question and taking action at the right time is going to be important. In terms of loyalty, again, I think that kind of comes back to what I spoke about before, like making sure you're having conversations and check-ins with your customers to know that, that North Star metric that you agreed on has been achieved. But I mean, like it comes in different shapes and sizes, right? You see it happen a lot with like e-commerce businesses that kind of give like product-based discounts. Really just depends on the kind of business you're in.
Yeah, that's it. Loyalty programs definitely have been shown to help with retention, right? It's one of those things that kind of almost built the Starbucks brand in the States, was once that punch card kind of came in, and then digitalizing it has kind of been seen as just so fundamental to the growth of that brand, which is kind of interesting.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, you look at so many businesses have tried to kind of gamify loyalty in terms of like status and points. Even at HubSpot, we have like tiering for our partners as well. There's rewards as they go through these different cycles of that tiering status. So I think gamification is a really interesting concept that not a lot of businesses have adopted. Obviously, you need to put a bit of thought and strategy behind what that looks like in reality. But people get behind it. People love, status upgrades through Qantas and flights, and people like it does drive repeat purchase. Right?
Yeah, definitely, 100%. And just in terms of data, like I know you opened it up with, but any clever ways or any observations around how businesses are using data to kind of get richer insights into customer base databases and to then use that data to aid retention?
I think one thing that's quite important is thinking about how, from a systems perspective, if you have, say, CRM, like a marketing CRM over here, have that connected to your finance system or your kind of accounting, which is kind of your system of record from a monetary perspective. So, I mean, like invoicing and billing, if that's done out of, say, like a Xero or a QuickBooks, whatever that might be, that should feed back into your CRM, so you can actually have a bi-directional flow of information to be able to update, you know, how much the customer has spent in the past, the services they've engaged previously. I think that kind of stuff is quite important, and that's usually a big disconnect for most businesses, is not having those different tools or systems talking to each other.
Yeah, nice one. That's a good one. And then in terms of inactive customers, I think that's an area of untapped value for lots of businesses. So if we actually have churned customer using a tool like HubSpot, like what's working to get people back in and engaging with a brand?
I think you firstly need to have a process in place when a customer does churn to understand the reasons for churning. So whether that's some sort of like offboarding or like customer interview or feedback that's received from that person when they leave, to really understand the reason why they've left, because based on that reason, I mean, that's going to dictate how you're going to approach them and have another conversation in the past. If it was around, you know, like if you're, again, like a software company, your product wasn't really up to scratch, that can help you to inform further development from a kind of like programmatic and coding perspective.
Yeah.
If it was around their objectives not being achieved in the right timeline, maybe you go back to the drawing boards to understand, are we setting the right expectations? So there's a bunch of different things, but I think like if you capture that information, it really helps you to drive the conversation moving forward with context.
Yeah. And we'll often say if we're running email campaigns, particularly if someone hasn't used a database for a while, existing customers are the richest territory to play, but then often that close second is churned, lapsed clients, because not all customers leave for bad reasons, right? It's timing, it's change of job, it's change of circumstance. So often there's very rich data available to businesses that simply just aren't being used. Nice one, mate. Well, I think it's been a really good chat. Definitely interesting, kind of the intersection, I think, of technology, marketing, sales, revenue. But I think just the importance of, first of all, measuring it, second of all, being accountable for it, and third, understanding why it's happening, probably bringing those three together pretty quickly. And once you've got those three things happening, then you can actually start, you know, doing practical things to try to bring that rate down, right? Or to keep the retention rate up. Always ask this piece of advice, this question. So what's the best piece of career advice you'd give to a marketer in Australia?
I would say be able to validate the work that you're doing. Probably the most frustrating thing I hear with marketers is that their work gets questioned a lot by their sales team, by their direct report, by their CEOs. So kind of have the ability to kind of use data to say, this is me proving the worth of my work. That's probably the number one, is to have the right kind of systems in place so you can show the report, look at the data and say, this is what I'm doing. These are the outcomes I'm driving.
It's a good one, mate. Yeah, follow the money.
Exactly.
Kieran, thanks for coming onto the pod.
Thanks a lot, James. Appreciate it.
Thanks, mate.